The question itself carries power. Is one individual controlling global money, or are markets reacting to something more subtle and more dangerous? Here's what nobody tells you. Global money has never been controlled the way people imagine. It has been influenced, nudged, startled, reassured, and occasionally terrified, but almost never commanded. Yet history shows that perception alone can move trillions. If this pattern applies, then the real issue isn't control. It's whether belief can temporarily substitute for authority. In your daily life, this shows up as sudden swings in prices, interest rates, and confidence that feel disconnected from fundamentals. At first, it looks like chaos. Then, the pattern emerges. In 1933, a single speech shifted Americans' relationship with gold. In 1971, a televised announcement rewired global money overnight. In 2008, words like systemic risk froze credit across continents. The unresolved question isn't whether global money can be controlled. It's whether it can be steered through psychology alone, and at what cost. This is where the pattern begins. Money, at its core, is belief made liquid. Gold once worked because people trusted its scarcity. Fiat money works because people trust institutions, rules, and continuity. When that trust weakens, money doesn't vanish, it moves. Fast. In the modern era, no single leader controls central banks, reserve currencies, or capital flows outright. But history shows something else. Leaders can influence expectations, and expectations can move markets faster than policy ever could. Not command. Reaction, not control. Reflex. Throughout the 20th century, moments of monetary upheaval were preceded by shifts in narrative. In 1933, when the U.S. abandoned the gold standard domestically, the move wasn't just legal. It was psychological. Confidence was collapsing, banks were failing, and hoarding was accelerating the crisis. The announcement changed behavior before balance sheets could. In 1971, when the dollar was detached from gold internationally, the shock wasn't gradual. It was instant. Currencies realigned, trust was renegotiated, and the modern floating system was born. Let me show you exactly how this works. Money reacts first in the mind, then in markets, and only later in data. Fast forward to the modern global system. Trillions of dollars move daily across borders, guided by interest rate expectations, political stability, and perceived risk. According to some economists, more than 90% of global currency transactions are speculative or hedging related, not tied to physical trade. That means narrative matters. Tone matters. Uncertainty matters. This is where individual figures can appear to control money without touching a lever. They inject volatility into expectations. When prominent leaders speak aggressively about trade, currencies, debt, or institutions, markets listen, not because of obedience, but because of exposure. Capital hates uncertainty more than bad news. A clear loss can be priced. Ambiguity cannot. Here's why this matters. When rhetoric introduces the possibility of rule changes, retaliation, or institutional stress, money moves preemptively, not because control exists, because risk does. This psychological leverage is often mistaken for dominance. Markets fall after a statement. Currencies weaken. Bonds rally. Headlines follow. The illusion forms, someone pulled the strings, but the danger wasn't what people saw. It was what they ignored. Markets weren't responding to authority. They were responding to unpredictability. At first, it looks like strength. The ability to move markets with words feels like power. Then the bill arrives. Volatility raises borrowing costs, investment pauses, hedging increases. According to one scenario suggested by analysts, repeated shocks reduce the effectiveness of signaling over time. Markets adapt. Sensitivity dulls. Reactions become shorter-lived but more violent. This is where perceived control starts to decay. Here's what nobody tells you. Global money systems are anti-fragile, only up to a point. They can absorb shocks, but they remember them. Risk premiums don't reset easily. Once trust is dented, it demands compensation, higher yields, lower valuations, tighter credit. The influence that once moved markets begins to encounter resistance, not from institutions, but from capital itself. This is where psychology flips. What once looked like control becomes noise, and noise is dangerous. Investors stop listening selectively. Everything is treated as potential disruption. According to some economists, this is how credibility erodes, not in collapse, but in dilution. Words lose force. Policy loses clarity. Markets begin pricing worst-case scenarios by default. The debate then misses the point. The question isn't whether global money is being controlled. It's whether it's being destabilized by perception loops. Leaders don't need authority over central banks to influence capital. They only need to make outcomes feel uncertain. But uncertainty cuts both ways. Here's the trap. When leaders interpret market reactions as obedience, they escalate. They speak louder. They push further. They assume reaction equals control. But markets aren't followers. They're survival machines. Once they sense unpredictability as a feature rather than a phase, they withdraw cooperation. Capital hides. Liquidity thins. Volatility spikes. By the end of this first act, the illusion is fully formed. It looks like someone is moving global money. In reality, global money is moving away from clarity. And that distinction matters more than any headline. Because the second act isn't about influence. It's about what happens when markets stop reacting the way they used to, and whether perceived power turns out to be the most fragile kind of all. The second act begins when the reactions change, not in size, but in character. Here's the mechanism. Markets don't ask who is in charge. They ask what might change next. Control implies direction. Psychology produces volatility. When words create uncertainty, capital doesn't follow them, it hedges against them. According to some analysts, this distinction explains why influence over global money is often overstated and misunderstood. Power moves systems deliberately. Perception jolts them unpredictably. In the early stages, rhetoric acts like a lever. Statements about trade, debt, currencies, or institutions trigger immediate adjustments. Equity markets reprice risk. Bond yields shift. Currencies react within seconds. It looks like command. But over time, repetition dulls the effect. At first, it looked like a miracle. Then the bill arrived. Each shock trains the system. Investors learn to fade moves, shorten horizons, and demand higher compensation for uncertainty. Influence doesn't grow, it decays. This is where history offers its warning. Leaders who appeared to dominate markets through rhetoric eventually encountered a ceiling. In the 1960s and 1970s, political pressure on monetary systems produced short-term compliance, followed by long-term inflation and credibility loss. In emerging markets, strong men have often moved currencies until capital fled entirely. Not obedience. Exit. Global money always has an outside option. Here's why this matters. Modern financial systems are built on expectations of continuity. Central banks signal gradually. Policy shifts are telegraphed. Stability is cultivated deliberately. When external rhetoric introduces abrupt uncertainty, it doesn't override these systems, it collides with them. According to one scenario economist's outline, the result isn't control, but friction. Markets begin to price a permanent uncertainty premium. This is where the psychology becomes dangerous. If leaders interpret early reactions as dominance, escalation follows. More aggressive language, sharper threats, bigger promises. Markets initially respond, but differently. Moves become more volatile, less directional. Liquidity thins. Correlations spike. Everyone thought the system was responding. It was bracing. Here's what nobody tells you. Global money doesn't rebel loudly. It withdraws quietly. Capital reallocates toward perceived stability. Reserve diversification accelerates. Hedging costs rise. Long-term investment slows. According to some analysts, this process is already visible whenever uncertainty becomes structural rather than episodic. Not collapse. Drift. Those who benefit in this environment are not the loudest actors. They are the fastest adapters. Institutions with global diversification. Firms with flexible supply chains. Investors positioned for volatility rather than direction. Those who pay are households and businesses exposed to higher borrowing costs and unstable prices. The danger wasn't what people saw, it was what they ignored. This reframes the entire debate. Control implies intent and outcome. Influence through psychology produces reaction without ownership of the consequences. That's the trap. If markets move against expectations, blame shifts outward. If they move favorably, credit is claimed. Over time, this mismatch erodes credibility. Markets stop interpreting signals as guidance. They interpret them as risk. Here's the trap in full. Mistaking reaction for control encourages overuse. Overuse breeds adaptation. Adaptation neutralizes influence. What remains is noise. And noise is expensive. According to conditional assessments, systems operating under persistent noise allocate capital defensively. Growth slows. Innovation hesitates. Stability becomes scarce. Looking forward, analysts outline diverging scenarios. In one, rhetoric stabilizes, institutions regain narrative clarity, and markets re-anchor expectations. Volatility fades. In another, perception-driven shocks continue, leading to fragmented capital flows and regional financial blocks. In a third, escalation forces formal policy responses, pulling institutions into political crossfire. None are guaranteed. All are shaped by restraint. Here's what nobody tells you. The most powerful influence over global money is not who speaks the loudest, but who preserves predictability. Control has always been institutional. Psychology is a temporary substitute, and an unstable one. So is global money being controlled? Or is it reacting to uncertainty injected into a system that values clarity above all else? The answer determines whether what looks like power today becomes fragility tomorrow. Because in global finance, the final verdict isn't delivered by headlines or speeches, it's delivered by capital flows. And capital, unlike belief, never lies.